Orlando gets their first win of the season!
With the impossible happening and new storylines potentially set for next week, we had an emotional weekend as the XFL had their Week 7 games, and there's a few things to discuss. Hey, how's it going? If you're new here, thank you for clicking on today's video, as it's time to talk about what transpired over the weekend. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you like the video, and let's talk about it. Alright, so even though we do these videos by the schedule usually, because of what transpired, we have to begin with this one, because what happened on Saturday night was great. We had the DC Defenders coming into Orlando to play the Guardians, who have had an emotional season all year while not winning a single game 6 weeks in. I honestly didn't expect much from this game, especially from what we've seen on tape from these two. I thought DC would just run through Orlando, and it did not go that way, as Orlando would end up winning in a massive shootout. Both offenses started out hot as they both scored a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown each, as it started with Jordan Ta'amu scoring quickly, continuing his great connection with Lucky Jackson, hitting a deep pass for 25 yards and a touchdown to start the game, along with Abram Smith getting a rushing touchdown in the first quarter. For Orlando, quarterback Quinton Dormady took a whole new meaning to literally taking the game over, as he'd score his first 2 touchdowns with 1 passing and 1 rushing, but he'd end up having an all-time game in the stat books for football, as he'd go on to score every single touchdown Orlando would score in the shootout, meaning he scored 6 touchdowns. While slinging it in the air scoring, he'd also ground and pound his way as well, scoring 3 touchdowns. After Dormady would score his second touchdown for 1 yard at the end of the half, he'd continue taking over by taking the lead on the first drive with a pass to Jordan Thomas for 15 yards for a touchdown. DC would respond quickly with a huge play from Jordan Ta'amu to wide receiver Chris Blair, outrunning everyone for 86 yards. After Dormady got his 3rd rushing touchdown of the day, DC would miss a big-time field goal in the game at the start of the 4th quarter to tie it. DC would get the ball back with a fumble though, and then would score quickly with another connection with Jordan Ta'amu and Lucky Jackson for 15 yards. Dormady would then have to walk onto the field with ice in his veins as he would throw what would be the game-winning score to Cody Latimer on a home run play for 44 yards. Latimer was not going to be denied too, as he would shrug some tackles on his way. Then, after a failed 63-yard field goal from DC, Orlando would finally win an emotional game and would end their losing streak by finally getting their first win of the season. With the Defenders losing though, that opens up the floodgates for the Sea Dragons, as they have an opportunity to take the number 1 spot in the division, as it'll be on the line next week. Alright, so back to the regular scheduling. Starting on Friday, speaking of the Seattle Sea Dragons, we had the Dragons trying to continue their winning streak as they play the Arlington Renegades at trying to get a W after losing last week to San Antonio at home. Early on, both defenses were playing well, having great coverages in the secondary while also getting to the quarterbacks. After Seattle kicked their second field goal in the second quarter to be up 6-3, they would go on to score their first touchdown after Seattle's defense got an underthrown pick from Arlington's Drew Plitt as he tried to hit the open receiver deep. Seattle would move quickly down the field to then pound it in with running back Darius Bradwell, as they're still missing Morgan Ellison with a knee injury. The Renegades would respond with a Devian Smith touchdown, getting his first of the day. Quarterback Ben DiNucci would score on the next drive with a beautiful pass to star wide receiver Josh Gordon, making another miraculous catch in the end zone, making the score 21-9 with the 2-point conversion. Though in the 3rd quarter, DiNucci would make another crucial mistake this season as he threw his 9th interception of the season, leading the league. Former NFL vet Will Hill would get the interception. Even with that interception, the Renegades weren't able to do much offensively other than try and make things closer towards the 2-minute warning, with a second rushing touchdown by Devian Smith topping his day with 64 rushing yards and 2 tubs. After that, Seattle would just run the ball with DJ Hammond and get their 5th straight win, winning 24-15 as they have to prepare for the biggest game of the season for the Seattle Sea Dragons next week. On Saturday, before the DC Defenders and the Orlando Guardians game, we had the San Antonio Brahmas traveling to Vegas to play the Vipers, with both teams looking for a W after losing last week. With both teams having issues having to find their quarterback this season, San Antonio would start Kurt Benkert, continuing on with Sinnott being still out. And Vegas, after trading Luis Perez this week, starts their third-string quarterback, Jalen McClendon. Both offenses scored quickly in the first quarter, as Benkert would score first off a lob on the 1-yard line to Fred Brown. Then Jalen would respond with a huge catch and run play to tight end Sean Price, running the ball in the end zone for 33 yards, including a King Henry type stiff arm at the end. After a Vegas field goal in the second quarter, San Antonio would immediately score off the first kickoff return for a touchdown this season, with returner Fred Brown, who already had a receiving touchdown, scores the kickoff return. Jalen McClendon would continue to show his worth as he'd march down the field making some great throws in big moments, including a dump-off play to Rod Smith on a catch and run as he hurdles a man into the end zone. Vegas would end the half with an interception by safety Deontay Anderson, having a score of 19-12 at halftime. Vegas would continue their hot hand on offense with Jalen as he'd throw a pass to Geronimo Allen, making an amazing catch on the sideline to set up a John Levitt score as he bounces the play on the outside into the end zone. The score wouldn't change for the rest of the game as the San Antonio Brahmas would fumble twice, one on a punt return as returner Terrell Bonds would fumble on the return, and then Benkert would fumble after, caused by a sack from Pitta Taumopenu. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. And recovered by Vic Beasley Jr., Vegas would go on to win 26-12. To finish week 7, we had the St. Louis Battlehawks, after demolishing Vegas last week, would then travel to play the maybe soon to change XFL South division leaders Houston Roughnecks, as they've had a rough 3 weeks lately, but are still trying to stay at the top of their division. The game started out hot as both defenses would get turnovers quickly, as the first play from scrimmage, running back Brian Hill would fumble the ball by John Daka. And then that next Houston drive, Cole McDonald would throw a pick to Brandon Sebastian. Then AJ and the Battlehawks offense would capitalize to score with a pass to the corner of the end zone to wide receiver Gary Jennings, for Cole McDonald to then respond with a passing touchdown of his own with a pass to Deontay Burnett on the goal line. St. Louis would end the half with a responding field goal to Houston as kicker Donald Hagman would make it from 59 yards out, extending their lead 17-9. Houston was going to need a big play, still being down going into the fourth quarter if they wanted any chance of winning, and defensive back Will Likely would get that play with a scoop and score in a huge part of the game as they're trying to come back. But St. Louis would score a dagger at the end with a beautiful lob to Darius Shepard off the play action. Houston would continue their struggles at the end by failing on a 4th down conversion. St. Louis would win the game, and Houston would continue their 3-game losing streak and their struggles offensively. Okay, so now that we are done talking about week 7, let's move on to week 8 of the XFL, starting with the Vegas Vipers traveling over to play AJ McCarron and the St. Louis Battlehawks at home. Now, in their last game, St. Louis was able to dominate them pretty easily throughout. This time around, I don't see them dominating as easily, but I still see them winning at home, especially with the hot hand that they have on offense with AJ McCarron. But I can definitely see it being closer, especially with Jalen McClendon being the new quarterback for Vegas, it looks like. Then moving on to the Arlington Renegades traveling over to play the Orlando Guardians. Now, for this one, I'm going to take Orlando. I'm going to take Orlando because I really like what Quentin Dormandy has been able to do for the Guardians offense, being able to basically transform them as they were terrible at the beginning of the year, and then as soon as he comes in, he changes the identity of that team. So I'm going to take Orlando at home against the Renegades. Then moving on to the Houston Roughnecks traveling over to play the San Antonio Brahmas. Now, even though both of these teams are struggling mightily I'm gonna take Houston because Houston does have the better team on paper, but if Sinnott does come in for the Brahmas, they might have a chance to win. Then to finish off the week, we have possibly the biggest game of the season for both of these teams and the XFL North Division, because it's on the line with the DC Defenders traveling to Seattle to play the Sea Dragons. And with the Seattle Sea Dragons debuting their new running back, Philip Lindsay, from the NFL, they do have a pretty high advantage, especially with DC losing their last game against Orlando, despite that it was only a field goal loss. With the recent loss from DC and all of the momentum from Seattle on their 5-game winning streak, I'm going to take Seattle here and make things a little more interesting towards the end of the season. Alright, so that's going to be the video this week, guys. Thank you for clicking on the video and watching, and hit the like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the season so far, and I hope you guys have a good one.